Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at something that's been in the news a lot lately, President Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter Biden. Specifically, we're looking at the federal gun and tax evasion charges that were pardoned. And what makes this really interesting is that President Biden initially said that he would not issue a pardon. So why the reversal? What does this mean in the context of a new administration coming in? And how does this speak to the use of presidential pardon power? But before we get into all that, we'd love to hear what your initial thoughts are, so be sure to leave a comment down below.
I think one of the most fascinating things to consider is the political context surrounding this decision. Hunter Biden became a prime target for Republicans. He faced accusations of corruption and receiving preferential treatment because of his father. And these allegations really intensified during the 2024 election, essentially putting both Hunter and then President Biden in the crosshairs.
And this was all happening right as President Biden decided to step back from the race, leaving then-candidate Harris to kind of face the music, so to speak. So could the timing of this pardon be an attempt to navigate that political landscape and shield the new administration from further attacks?
Yeah, that's a really key question. I mean, if the pardon had come before the election, it might have had a more significant impact on Harris's campaign. So delaying it until after the election, when some of those political tensions had cooled down, could be seen as strategic. But it also raises questions about, was this really driven by political considerations rather than a genuine belief in Hunter Biden's innocence or need for a pardon?
Right. And let's look a little more closely at the specific charges that Hunter Biden faced here. He was convicted on federal gun charges and pleaded guilty to federal tax evasion. There was a possibility of some pretty substantial sentences. But as our sources point out, those maximum sentences are very rarely given out in these types of cases.
And what's particularly intriguing is President Biden's rationale for the pardon. In his official statement, he actually suggests that the prosecution of his son was politically motivated, almost as an attempt to target him through Hunter. And he even brought up Hunter's past struggles with addiction and his journey to sobriety, highlighting the personal toll of these accusations.
So it seems like there's a very complex interplay of factors here: the timing, the political accusations, the personal father-son dynamic. It all kind of contributes to the controversy surrounding this decision.
Yeah, and it's also crucial to remember the broader implications as well. The presidential pardon power is a significant authority granted to the president, and it's not without its limits. Historically, its use has been met with both praise and outrage, depending on the circumstances and the individuals involved.
I mean, think back to Ford pardoning Nixon, right? These decisions are rarely simple, and they always carry these far-reaching consequences.
Exactly, and when it comes to pardoning family members in particular, it raises even more ethical questions. Critics argue that such actions could undermine the principle of equal justice under the law, creating this perception that those with connections and influence operate under a different set of rules.
But there's also the perspective that President Biden, as a father, was simply trying to protect his son from what he saw as an unfair and politically driven prosecution. He even cited miscarriage of justice, suggesting that the legal proceedings against Hunter were flawed from the start.
Which is interesting considering that those proceedings were conducted by the Justice Department under the leadership of Special Counsel David Weiss.
Right, and that kind of brings us to Neil Eggleston, who served as White House counsel under President Obama. And he actually voiced support for the pardon and argued that President Biden acted within his rights as president.
He even suggested that Biden should have pardoned Hunter before the new administration took office, almost as if anticipating the potential challenges from the incoming Trump administration as a way to kind of preemptively protect Hunter from what he perceived as a potentially hostile Justice Department.
So we have this historical context of the pardon power being used, sometimes controversially. And now this very sensitive case involving a president and his son. It's this really tangled web of legal, political, and familial threads.
Absolutely, it really is. And, it's not just about the individuals involved. These decisions reverberate outward. They shape public perception of the presidency, the justice system, and even our democracy as a whole.
And it really makes you think about the message this sends, right? Does this reinforce the idea that there's one set of rules for the powerful and another set of rules for everybody else?
Yeah, that's a concern that a lot of critics of the pardon have raised, that it undermines this principle of equal justice and, creates a perception that if you have influence, you can kind of avoid accountability.
But then there's also that perspective that any parent, even a president, would want to protect their child, especially if they believe that they've been wrongly accused.
Right, and that's where I think the ethical considerations get even more complicated. Is it ever appropriate for a president to use this power for family members, even if they believe those family members have been treated unfairly?
It's a tough question, and I don't think public opinion is going to give us a clear answer on this one.
You're right. Public reaction to the pardon has been mixed, with some people supporting President Biden's decision and others condemning it as an abuse of power.
So this really brings us back to our original question. What does this all mean? What are the long-term implications of this pardon?
Well, it's hard to say for certain, but I think it's safe to assume this case will continue to be debated and analyzed for years to come. It's really a pivotal moment in this ongoing conversation about the scope of presidential power, the role of politics in the justice system, and the ethical considerations surrounding the pardon power.
It's a conversation that we can't shy away from. We need to understand these different perspectives and really think about what the potential consequences of these decisions are.
And this isn't just a historical footnote, right? This is a live issue. It's going to continue to shape the political landscape, and it could very well influence how future presidents use the pardon power.
So where do we go from here? What can we learn from this situation?
Well, I think one key takeaway is the importance of transparency and accountability. When it comes to the pardon power, the public deserves to understand the reasons behind these decisions.
And we need to make sure that this power isn't being used for personal gain or political maneuvering.
Absolutely. We've got to find that balance between allowing presidents the flexibility to show mercy and also guarding against the potential for corruption and undue influence.
It's a delicate balance, and it really does require this ongoing discussion and debate to ensure that justice is served fairly and impartially, regardless of your political affiliations or your family ties.
Very well said. This case has certainly highlighted how complex this issue of the pardon power is. And it's a conversation that needs to continue, both within our legal and political systems, but also among the public.
Yeah, it's a conversation that's far from over. And we really encourage you, our listeners, to be part of it, share your thoughts, your concerns, your insights. What lessons do you think we should take away from this? What do you think about the use of the pardon power in this case? What safeguards, if any, should be put in place? How can we make sure that justice is served fairly for everyone?
Because ultimately this is about more than just one pardon. It's about more than just one president or one political family. It's about the very principles that form our justice system and the trust that we place in those who hold positions of power.
It really gets at the heart of what we value as a society. Fairness, accountability, transparency. I mean, these are the cornerstones of a functioning democracy.
Right.
And when we feel like those principles are being compromised, it really weakens our trust in those institutions.
Exactly. And that's why this conversation is so crucial. We need to have this thoughtful, informed dialogue about the pardon power. Its history, its potential for both good and bad, and the safeguards that we need to ensure that it's used responsibly and ethically.
And it's a conversation that really does go beyond party lines. This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans. This is about upholding the values that unite us as Americans.
Absolutely. We need to approach this issue with nuance, recognizing the complexities and the valid arguments on both sides. And we need to hold our leaders accountable, no matter their political party, to make sure that they're using this pardon power in a way that serves justice and the common good.
Well said. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that President Biden's decision to pardon his son Hunter has really opened up this Pandora's box of questions and concerns.
It has indeed. And it's a box that we can't afford to ignore. We need to look at what's inside carefully, thoughtfully, and with a commitment to upholding those principles of fairness, accountability, and justice that are so vital to the health of our democracy.
What stands out to you about this whole situation? What are your thoughts on how the pardon power was used in this case? Do you think there should be stricter guidelines, or is the system kind of working as intended? Let us know your reflections down in the comments, because we always love to hear your perspective.
This entire situation, from the initial accusations against Hunter Biden to the final pardon, has been a stark reminder of just how deeply intertwined politics, justice, and family can become. It's raised questions about fairness, accountability, and the potential for conflicts of interest at the highest levels of power.
Yeah, and it also highlights the enduring power of the presidency, right? Even after leaving office, a president's actions can have these lasting consequences. It shapes not only their own legacy, but also the public discourse and the course of future events.
We've seen that play out in various ways throughout history. I mean, think about the lasting impact of Nixon's pardon or the ongoing debates about the pardons issued by President Trump. These decisions continue to generate discussion and really influence how we understand executive power.
And it's not just about legal precedent either. These cases also shape public perception and trust. When people see the pardon power being used in ways that seem politically motivated or only benefit those in power, it can erode faith in the impartiality of the justice system.
That's why it's so important to have these conversations, to analyze these events from multiple angles and consider those potential long-term ramifications. We need to be vigilant about ensuring that justice is served fairly and that those in power are held accountable for their actions.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we'll leave you with this final thought. What does the Hunter Biden pardon tell us about the evolving relationship between power accountability and the pursuit of justice in the modern political landscape?
It's a question that deserves careful consideration, and we encourage you to continue exploring it on your own. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.